Hello, everybody. I would really like to talk about the kingdom of man, especially in relation to the kingdom of God. Now, every single Christian, the real reason why we are in existence is really to try to further and to establish the kingdom of God rather than the kingdom of man. But the problem is more often than not, we don't actually know what the kingdom of God looks like, and we don't really know what the kingdom of man looks like. So a lot of us are basically fighting a battle we don't even know exactly what it is in order to actually even win it. So, the kingdom of man. Okay. The kingdom of man is established when a man or a woman, but the majority is usually man, um, really tries to collect for himself people, resources, and power. Now, all those things are incredibly important for a person who is especially trying to grow his kingdom and to assert as much control over his group as possible. If you help people, you win a certain amount of say in their life, and you can basically tell them to dance for you, and they will have to dance for you if they are in as needy of a position and situation as possible. You can pretty much force them or get them to do mostly anything. If you have enough people, that means you are stronger. If you have people with resources that are underneath your control, you can control those particular resources that they bring. And of course, any kind of power is the ability to punish anybody who breaks your particular rules or your requests that you basically put on people in order to get them to obey you. When we look at the kingdom of God, we see something quite different. We see God who loves unconditionally. He says you don't need to bring anything. He does request us to ask him for what it is that we want, what it is that we need, but he gives us no condition for doing those things for us. God is neither trying to collect people, resources, nor things, and he can deliver us no matter what. Now, when we are looking at a person, and I'm going to really specifically bring up churches right now, where the pastor is operating in the power of man, he will be trying very, very hard to keep his people working for their salvation and for their good, because the more he can get them caught up in following rules, the less they're actually able to really realize what is happening. So if a person just keeps on thinking like, well, if I would just be working a little bit harder at church, if I would just be wearing better clothes, if I never swore, if I never drank, whatever, then God could bless me. Then the pastor is constantly withholding blessings because he's found some way of basically controlling the resources. And of course, the name of the game when somebody is really trying to assert control over is that no matter how much you do, especially for them or for their own kingdom, the more they lift the bar in order for you to never be able to actually attain being able to follow the rules. And this is man's attempt to control his people, and is direct violation to God. Now, if a person comes who really sincerely loves God and really sincerely gives out of their resources and really truly cares about that particular entity or that group or that pastor, they will pray and they will give of their resources without any kind of hesitation, because they believe in God and they love God and they love his kingdom. Then unfortunately that pastor will do everything they possibly can to persecute and to try to usurp any kind of particular freedom that that particular person has. And of course the reason being is because that person is usually overflowing with resources, because God really, really, truly blesses a person like that. And second of all, they don't want that message of freedom to go to the rest of their people. So what they have to do is they have to constantly point out their faults, their flaws. They have to undo the message of grace and mercy. They have to basically do whatever it is that they can to discredit that person. Now, of course, they're going to want to keep that person. So they're also hoping that if they beat up that person enough, then of course that person will stay attached to them rather than move on to somebody else. So this is a pattern of control and a pattern of abuse that we can see pretty much anywhere. It doesn't matter if it's a church, it doesn't matter if it's a husband, it doesn't matter if it's a boyfriend, it doesn't matter if it is a company, it doesn't really matter, because where man is, there is always the desire to establish man's kingdom, and it always comes with trying to gather more and more people, more and more resources, and more power. Which is, of course, in direct violation to God's command that we are shepherds and we look out for the best of our people. So, if you are a woman and you are dating a man who suddenly starts to criticize you and find fault with you, I think some of the best criticisms that they can come up with, especially in America, it's very different in other countries and other cultures, but in America it's very much like, well, your dress is a little bit too tempting. So, and of course, usually that is their way of either trying to guilt trip you into sleeping with them for trying to tempt them, or basically out and out justifying their out and out rape of who you are and trying to rape you. If the man constantly finds fault with you or points out all of your weaknesses and faults and maybe even throws in some that's not even there, you know, he is basically he sees a person who has a tremendous amount of resources, and he is basically trying to seize control over them through seizing control over that particular person. And they will always do it by trying to find ways of establishing rules that may or may not make any sense whatsoever, and then finding you guilty of breaking those rules. Another one that we can find is that you are in a relationship with a man and he is with other women, and as soon as you even talk to another man, he's getting angry and he is basically wanting to break up with you, or he's finding fault with you. And unfortunately, that is once again where the rules apply to his people but not to himself. And the reason being is because he is trying to control you through law and through breaking the law. I went through the whole thing with the ministers, but the pattern is always the same, that when a king is trying to establish his own kingdom, he will always try to gather for himself people, power, and resources, and he will always try to make you work for those resources. He will not just give them out of the kindness of his heart, and he will not just give them to you because you need them. It will always be in relation to how much you allow him to control you. I know that recently, there's a really, really big war on race right now, and a lot of discussion about racism. And of course, I have a video about my thoughts on that, and I really wanted to bring up a particular scenario that most people in modern society isn't really quite considering. I have a friend from Pakistan of whom I love very much and truly and sincerely. Whenever he greets me as, "Hello, white woman." And so therefore, I greet him back with, "Hello, brown boy." And he, of course, gets very angry and he calls me a racist. And here is the problem. If he is able to point out my race and my particular color, and I'm not allowed to point out his race or his color, then that is him trying to gain control and authority over me by coming up with a rule, being above that rule himself, but then punishing me with an accusation of racism for breaking that rule. And of course, I don't really care that much about it. So, that is my particular opinion about pretty much all of these situations and scenarios. Is like, the pastor who tells me that he doesn't think that I'm a Christian because I swear, or the minister who I basically helped establish and protected and grew up and gave him revelations. And he said, well, you swear, so you can't really be anything other than the least in the kingdom of heaven because you have used a swear word. All those particular men, whether it is my friend from Pakistan or whether it is a white boy who tries to tell me that my clothes are not as appropriate or might be meant to try to allure him. And I refer to some of my favorite songs, which is Kid Rock. He's come up with some really, really good music. And basically, I can encourage every single person that if you are, even if you're a woman, if you are trying to basically withhold your resources, trying to force people to do what you say, not to do what you say, to have the opinions that you have, or to refuse some of the opinions that they have, you are trying to establish your own kingdom in direct violation against the kingdom of God. So, I hope that while rules and regulations should always be to love and to show love and to give resources and to be generous and to be kind, we should all be doing that, and we should all do that through our faith in Jesus Christ. If people in our lives really try to say that in order to find help or salvation in them, that we all So, good luck. You guys might want to follow the rules in order to receive help from somebody, but I choose to receive my help from God, my protection from God, and anything else that I might particularly need. Because men will only help you if they're allowed to have some kind of particular control over you. And I don't go for that.